from a land so far. I was caught and I was brought here from Africa. I'm a slave from a land so far. I was caught and I was brought here from Africa. Well, it was lips like fire from the white slave master every day. I down on my knees, weeks and weeks before we crossed the seas to reach in the West Indies. And then they make me work.
Yes, I work.
I said I work.
And I work.
Good
Lord, no pay.
I toil,
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 toil, hard each day.
I'm dying. I'm crying, my God. Ooh, oh, oh. Well, Lord, I want to be free. Cha. Many times I wanted to run, but the English slave master standing there with the gun, the gun, the gun. Oh, I know he gonna shoot to kill. So I stay and I pray, but I'm planning still. Yes, I study night and day how to break away. I got to make a brilliant escape. But every time I think about the whip and them dogs, my body that start to shake. He make me work.
Yes, I work.
I said I work.
Yes, I work.
Oh Lord,
no pay.
I toil, I toil hard each day. I'm dying. I'm in my heart, there was much to say, and I hope that the boss would have listened to me someday. Although he knew my request was small, it was the stick and the whip there to answer me when I called. We had to chant and sing to express our feeling to that wicked and cruel man. That was the only medicine to make him listen. And it's so calypso began. He made me work.
Yes, I work.
I work.
And I work.
Oh Lord, I toil.
Hard each day.
I'm dying, oh Lord. Crying to my God. The boss would have listened to me someday. Although he knew my request was small, it was the stick and the whip there to answer me when I called. We had to chant and sing to express our feeling to that wicked and cruel man. That was the only medicine to make him listen. And it's so calypso began. He made me work.
Yes, I work.
I work.
And I work.
Oh Lord, I toil. Hard each day. I'm dying, oh And then times change in so many, many, many ways. Till one day, somebody said, free the bloody slaves. I was then put out on the street. I had no clothes, I had no food, I had no place to sleep. Lord, I had no education, no particular ambition. This I cannot conceal. Forgot my native culture. I live like a vulture. From the white man I had to steal because he made me work.
Yes, I work.
I work.
Yes, I work.
Oh Lord,
Lord, no pay.
time,
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 time, time, time. Ah.
till one day somebody said, free the bloody slaves. I was then put out on the street. I had no clothes, I had no food, I had no place to sleep. Lord, I had no education, no particular ambition. This I cannot conceal. Forgot my native culture. I live like a vulture. From the white man I had to steal because he made me work.
Yes, I work.
I work.
Yes, I work.
Oh
Lord, no pay.
Lord, time,
Time. Ah, each day.
I'm dying. I'm oh Lord, I want to be free.
Wow, the one and only, the mighty Sparrow, Slinger Francisco. He is 88 years old this year. The greatest of them all. The greatest of them all. We've been playing calypsos on this program for the last couple of months. The Mighty Sparrow is the greatest of them all. And that song, I'm a Slave, that calypso, which is a classic, I consider it to be the greatest calypso ever written. I'm a Slave by Sparrow, tracing the experience of our people from the shores of Africa through the Middle Passage, on the plantation to freedom. Sparrow is singing that calypso in the early 60s. Oh Lord, I want to be free. I want to be free. You make me work for no pay. Today we're talking about reparations. Sparrow was exploring reparations way back then. Way back then. Way back then. One of the greatest calypsos of all time. Good evening and welcome to our Saturday night special. I know Saturday night is the night when we go out and have a good time and relax, throw back, take a little talks and so on. But this is the Saturday night before elections in Guyana, so we thought we would come on and do a little show. Kiraki Amsterdam is going to join me. We're going to be chatting about the issues, the elections. The political parties are holding their closing rallies as we speak. Big rallies in Linden and I think Georgetown, and the PPP is holding their rally and so on. And we thought that we'll come here and have a bit of a conversation relating to the election and other issues. Welcome to Politics 101. It's easily the most important local government election in certainly in my lifetime. And local government is very important. In fact, our local government was born in the village movement because when our foreparents freed themselves from the plantation ultimately in 1838, and they bought lands and created their villages. They did a couple of things. They created schools, and they created their churches next to the schools. They created their economy, began to do agriculture economy, and then they created a government, which we now call the village councils. Well, of course, the village councils have been done away with, and now we have neighborhood councils and regional councils and so forth. But the mother of local government councils are the village councils, created by our foreparents immediately after slavery. Local democracy is extremely important because it is the closest entry the people have to government. You live in Golden Grove or Port Morant or Denhamstel or Queenstown in the Essequibo. You don't have to travel to Georgetown to get into government. You can engage government right in your village, in your community. So it is the closest that government can get to the people, local government, the neighborhood councils, the regional councils, the municipalities, etc. Good evening to you, Mr. Morgan, joining us from South Carolina. Good evening, Winston and Audrey and Barbara and all of you wonderful people who are joining us impromptu on a Saturday night. We're talking about local government, and we said local government is the closest government to the people, and it is very important. As a young boy in Buxton, we had what was called the Buxton Youth Council. It was a youth version of the village council. What we did is that each club in the village nominated someone to sit on the council. And we would meet, I think, every Wednesday, because that's when the village council would meet. I think they met on Wednesday, we would meet on Tuesday. And we would have our council meetings, and young people would come and they would make representation. And then on Wednesday, we would go to the village council meeting, because the village council meeting was open to the community. And you could go there and make representations for your village. That was my first entry into politics. I was still in short pants. I think it was about 13 or so, but I belonged to a few clubs. And I remember people like Kwesi and Kofi and Kimani Nehusi and John Cromwell, and some of the names are I'm not remember, Sister Yvette Herod. They were a little bit older than me, and they were those of us who were 12, 13. So we had our first experience of politics in that Buxton Youth Council. And we learned how to carry on meetings. We learned how to make representation. We learned how to take representation. And that was the first baptism I had in politics. And talking about that, when you get that baptism in politics at 12, 13, by the time you get to age 19, 20, you're a veteran. And you are schooled in politics in a practical way. You learn the issues, you learn the art of representation, and so forth. And I shed a tear these days when I look at the politicians we have, and it's clear that they did not come through the ranks. You hear people saying, this body going to be a good presidential candidate, and that body going to be a good, because that body look nice and all that kind of story, I said, what have politics become? What have politics become? You learn politics at the local level. Good evening, Good evening, Kidaki Amsterdam.
Good evening, Dr. Hines.
And I think I can say
Good evening, viewers.
I can pull ranks here because you came through the ranks. You learned politics under me from the time you were a little boy too. By the time you came around, the Buxton Youth Council was gone, but we had lesson plays, we had the Buxton for 1st of August movement, and your generation filtered right in to that. And you all began to learn local politics in the same way that my generation 10 years before began to learn local politics. And by the time people like myself migrated, you all were thrown into the deep end. People like you and Dion Abrams and so on. Reflect a little bit on those early years of political activism in Boston.
Well, I can tell you, Dr. Hines, I can tell you for a fact that, let me start by saying the Buxton Falls NDC now meets on Tuesday. It's the second Tuesday of every month. They meet
It's
from
the
2
second
o'clock.
Tuesday, so are the days
Right?
mixed up? Yes.
Right. They meet from 2 o'clock, I think. Either 1 or 2 o'clock at the NDC office there at Buxton. But I must say that my generation, had the benefit of several persons to teach us, to introduce us, to groom us in politics, because, like you said, we learned politics under you, but we also had Brother Yussi Kwano.
All of us had him.
Right. So you had Brother Yussi Kwano, but we had the benefit of yourself and Brother Yussi Kwano along with Kwame Pat and all the others. Right? And so, yes, my generation really had, I would say, a good team to bring us into understanding not only village politics, but national politics. Just as how you mentioned that there was the Buxton Youth Council, we did not have a formal organization per se with that name. But you see, always encourage us to go to the NDC meeting and to follow up and find out what's happening there. If we had issues, we knew for a fact that if we had issues, we could have gone to the NDC meeting and raised those issues, right? And so we used to go around the village and we used to very well observe what's happening in the village. And we were always encouraged, even in class. That was our teaching ground. Basically, in class, you're doing English language, but you're asked to write letters to the NDC and so on to highlight your concerns. So we really had that exposure. Up until now, I must shout out my friend Ethan Moses, because Ethan Moses and we were the people who used to we were always in the forefront there as young folks in the village, dealing with the politics and so on. And I'm proud to say that Ethan has continued to pay attention to what is happening in the country, politically and otherwise. He's employed at the Parliament buildings. Where else to see the politics of the country?
At the Parliament buildings.
From a personal perspective, I've had the opportunity, tremendous opportunities to not only be of service in my community in Buxton, but nationwide. It is that grooming that can allow me to sit every day on Guyanese Morning Time and raise issues and identify issues and criticize and analyze and so on. I remember as a teenager, perhaps 17, 18, the Buxton Bagdam side used to have an electricity issue. Every night, basically, we used to have blackout, sectional blackout, because the transformer at the back of the village there was too small. It couldn't take the load from the area. And, everybody just complaining. And one day I decided, listen, I'm going to pen a letter. And I wrote a letter. I think it was the Public Utilities Commission at the time that I wrote to. And sometime after, the representatives of GPL came to replace the transformer as a result of the intervention of the PUC. The foreman, I remember, left his workmen and came in search of Kidaki Amsterdam. When he came and he saw me, he said, wait, man, a little boy like you get big man like me, I run a come a boxing for come fix transformer. Right? And I'm saying that to say that, especially to young people, you don't have to be 16, 17, you don't have to be 80 and 90 and 40 and 50 to really participate in the local governance issues in the community. Right? You just have to have an interest, and with the correct guidance, you can play your part. You can play
You
your
can
part.
you can play your part, and you introduce a UC choir, and I know he's a legend in our country, and I hope sometimes non-Buxtonians do not believe we are making too much, but that man has played such a tremendous role, I would say, in the life of each Buxtonian of several generations. And he touched each of us, not necessarily because he engaged every day with each of us, but his example was so large, his example was so profound, that as an individual villager, you were touched. And people like yourself and myself, who had and still have the privilege of working with him directly, as they used to say in my time, them quiet buys, you know, really his impact, his example have been so tremendous. I said to people, I don't know what I would have done with my life if I had not been part of the Kwayana circle. I might have gone on to be things. But in terms of perspective, in terms of public service, in terms of politics and society, um, I think Kwayana's help um, is enormous, enormous, enormous. And I think I speak for every single Buxtonian of several generations who have been
I
touched.
know, Dr. Hines, we while we are proud and we are happy that we have had Brother UC for, well, technically ourselves as a villager, that impact that Brother UC has had is not only restricted to boxing, it's countrywide, quite frankly.
Yeah,
Everywhere you turn, somebody can tell you of the influence Brother UC has had on them. Right. And so it's not restricted to boxing. So I am almost sure that, people across the country can identify um, with what we speak, or what we have experienced when we talk about the influence of Brother UC on us. As a
yes,
matter of fact, nationally, I just the other day I was referring to, because somebody was talking about corruption in government, and they were raising the issue with the transfer of mud flats to BK Tiwari. And I had to point out to them that the first minister of the PPP government, as I remember, that was taken before the ombudsman for corrupt practices. If I remember clearly, let me see, allegedly, it was corrupt practices involving the very BK Tiwari company. Was Hari Prasad Nokta, I think, taken to the ombudsman because of the quote unquote sale of a car to his son from that businessman, right? And that's an example that Brother UC set. Brother UC took him to the ombudsman for corruption in government, and forced the then PPP to establish an anti-corruption committee in the party. Well, history will show you that the anti-corruption committee never really worked. Likewise, when there was the issue of a PPP operative, Beast, in Enmore, when he was found with an entire armory and the police weren't charging him and all of that, Brother UC took it upon himself and charged that man the private criminal charges. At the end of the day, they pull out the page from the property books, so you couldn't find the list of the arms and ammunition that he had and all of that. In that case, I think eventually petered out. But those are examples of what Brother UC set in terms of public service and public activism.
and someone is mentioning here ASCRE, of course, and one of the things that Kwayana taught us, if there's a problem, form an organization and attack the problem. I can't count the number of organizations that Kwayana has originated, just in Buxton alone, not to talk about nationally. And it's one of the strong areas of his praxis, was that he organized. And last night, I on Politics 101, I made the point that whatever the outcome, of these elections on Monday, one thing that is clear is that the African Guyanese community needs attention at the level of our consciousness. And I was making the point that we can produce the best scientists, the best agricultural scientists, the best entrepreneurs, the best academics, if they do not have consciousness, a sense of self-worth, we're not making any difference. And I listened to some of the Black people who were on the PPP slate, and I mourn. I believe people have a right to belong to whatever party they want to belong to. That is their God-given right, their democratic right. But when you listen what comes out of Black people's mouth, those who are mounting the PPP platform, you feel so sad. But you also must take responsibility, as I have done, as we are doing, that we, in a sense, have failed our community. Because ultimately, what stands between people selling their dignity and holding on to that dignity is consciousness. It's consciousness. And it is clear that the level of consciousness of self in the Black community is at an all-time low. And so whatever the outcome of these local government elections, we have got work to do in our community. The work is especially difficult because unlike, let's say, the East Indian community, in that community they have institutions, the temples, the mosques, the mandirs. They are centers of Indian culture, and they are permanent institutions. And so by the time the Indian Guyanese gets to the political party, that Indian Guyanese has a sense of consciousness, has a sense of self, a sense of identity. You know, often when Indians tell Black people they have to be Guyanese, I say, oh, insultive, because they don't have to tell Indians about being Indians. They can spout Guyanese because their Indianness is intact, while they're telling us to substitute our Africanness for Guyanese. And because we don't have a Black church, Black people go to church, but those churches are not centers of Black consciousness. We go to schools, but our schools are not centers of Black consciousness. And so our people have had to, get that consciousness on their own, because institutions such as ASCREA are no longer there. We have, 60-something Black organizations registered with IPADG, but they obviously are not doing consciousness-raising work. They put on festivals, they, do the emancipation thing. But in terms of consciousness-raising, we're in a bad shape. Your reflections?
Well, I must say, through the influence of Brother Yussi and yourself and so on, we in Boston, we have been lucky. We have been lucky, and even this generation of Bostonians, the younger generations, can consider themselves lucky, because since I knew myself as a boy, we have been exposed to not only the cultural aspects of our Africanness, but we have always been exposed to that which help us to be conscious of who we are, what we are about, what are our challenges, and how to confront those challenges, how to deal with those challenges. And again, it is the kind of work that has been done in the Bostonian community by the elders who have imparted that knowledge to us, that consciousness to us. That kind of work has, for the greater part, separated Bostonians from the rest. separated us from the rest. And so when you go any place, people look at you in a certain way, and when they hear you're Bostonian, they look at you in a certain way because of that positivity, right, that you display, that positive energy that you exert. Some people see it as bullish, some people see it as boastful, some people believe that you are arrogant, but it is that consciousness which has been taught to us in the Bostonian community that really has given us the kind of confidence that we approach national issues with, not only local issues, but nationally. When we turn up as a Bostonian, we turn up because we are consistently exposed to organizations and individuals in the Bostonian community that allow us to be aware, right? It's not the same thing in other communities. It's not the
Well,
same.
at the level of the country, we are really bad shape nationally, and we've got serious work to do. Again, I said I am not telling people which party to join. That's your right. I grew up in a village. There was always a handful of people who were PPP, and the village lived with that. We understood that. But as I said, this barefaced, obscene, raiding, poaching of people in the community, and paying them, bribing them, and the ease with which the PPP is doing it, is really mind-boggling. And it says a lot about what we have not been able to do in a consistent way in our community. Our people are racially illiterate. And I blame the political parties, especially the PNC. I blame them in part for it, because they have not worked out a praxis of how to deal with their community. They deal with their community simply as voters, and they don't deal with them as people of a particular cultural heritage. They run away from anything Black. And so they've not helped to socialize our people. As Black, I mean, a party like the PNC should have an African Guyanese arm, an Indian Guyanese arm. But they don't do that. And as I said, Indian Guyanese don't suffer as much as our community because they have institutions in their community. Our community has invested in the PNC. In fact, they've invested everything in the PNC. And the PNC has not invested in them at the level of their consciousness. And so here we have, in 2023, Black people are being poached. They're being bribed. And the ease with which the PNC, the PPP is doing it, without fear. Without fear. We can't hide from it. We have seen the Black people at the people's rallies. You can't deny it anymore. Yes, it may be a small group compared with the vast number of our people who have not gone over. But it is clear and they are not aware that they are being insulted. And that's where the level of consciousness comes in. It's a lack of awareness. Yes, go ahead.
I totally agree with you, Dr. Hines, in saying that, that lack of awareness has to be placed squarely at the foot of the PNC for a greater part, because, like you rightly said, that is where the majority Afro-Guyanese look to for their leadership. That is where they put their support. I had a call this morning. From somebody who clearly is supporting the PPP, and I asked myself if it was a conscience call. right? Because this individual called me, most likely an elderly person, to explain to me, listen, I basically am supporting the PPP because the PPP is giving things to me, right? The allegation, the accusation, the justification is that, you know, when the coalition was in office and you go to see ministers and so on, they push you around. You couldn't get any proper pay and all of that. And, you know, I had this discussion with this individual to point out the fact that, listen, the majority of Guyanese work in the public service, the majority of Afro-Guyanese work in the public service. And the coalition, regardless of how you see it, made efforts to fix their salaries, to increase their salaries and so on. But then in the entire discussion, it came down to individualism.
Yeah. But
Right?
Tidaki is more than individualism. It's more than individualism.
So I say individualism because just now, because this individual is saying to me, but I am now getting contracts.
Yes,
When the
yes,
coalition
yes,
was there, I
yes.
couldn't get contracts.
Yes, but it's more than individualism. The coalition did things that benefited Black people. Let's get that straight. But they did not do those things for Black people as Black people. They did it as the government did for all citizens. The PPP is identifying Black people as Black people. They're not saying it that way as I'm saying it, but they are recruiting these people as Black people. And they're saying, your party and your government did not give you anything as Black people. And that is the key. The PNC does not engage Black people as Black people. And the PPP is engaging them as Black people. So the individualism thing is the outcome. But the key is that people identify. That's where the thing identity comes from. Identity is perhaps the strongest thing. If I say John, you are not going to look around. I say Kidaki. You look around because your name is your identity. All right. Identity is a very, very strong factor. And our people do not pay enough attention to identity. They run away from identity. And they take on the civic identity that is called Guyana. What is Guyana? Guyana is a piece of earth that we all share. We share a flag, we share a national anthem, we share a constitution, we share a government. That is the definition of Guyana. That can change. If Venezuela takes 3/4 of Guyana as they're threatening to do, that part of Guyana will become Venezuela. That civic Essequibo will become Venezuela. So this thing that they tell us about Guyanese, it can go off the map tomorrow. But your African identity, your Indian identity, it has retained its potency over centuries. We have survived the Middle Passage, survived slavery, and we are still African. Not even slavery could beat African out of us. But we run away from that identity. Our parties encourage us to do so. And now we have a party that is coming to you and saying, we are recruiting you as Black people. You're not equal to us. You're not equal to Indian. But we're going to give you enough to say that you're getting more than you have now. So they're recruiting you for crumbs. But our people don't have the cultural awareness to realize that they're getting crumbs. That's the point I'm making. Go ahead.
And again, I totally agree with you in terms of how they recruited and the stories that are told to them in the recruitment. Because like I said, this individual is saying to me this morning, but I get in contract now. And I took the time to point out, yeah, black people getting contract, but they're getting the lowest of low. You get a contract to clean a drain, a trench, to weed a parapet. 60 contracts giving out in Borbis in Region 6. The token African Guyanese among the list also are the people with the lowest valued contracts, 11 and 12 and 14 million dollars, when the others are getting 47 and 50 and 37 and 48 million dollars in contracts, right? And again, they can accept the pittances, they can believe that it is they are indeed getting, because they have not had the opportunity, I might want to see, or have not taken the opportunity to really sit and examine what is happening in the society, like you said, be culturally aware, right, of where the society is at, and despite and recognize that yes, despite their calling us into their party, they're bringing, saying they want us in their fold, even though they're discriminating us and treating us badly.
You know, if I were that call, I will tell you, Kidaki, both done gonna fall. What you're telling me now, you should have told me 5 years ago. I would tell you that, no, that message that you were talking to that guy about, you shouldn't be talking to him. You should be talking to the young people. That's
Well,
the work we have to do.
I was about to respond to the both on Ghana Falls. The fact is, a lot of them end up at falls because a lot of them do not even if they're given the opportunity, even Buxton, for example, we have created the opportunities, Dr. Hines. We are always promoting cultural awareness in the community, economic awareness in the community. And this generation of young people who are running the PPP, quote unquote, open arms and claiming that we got to eat a bread, we got to get a food. A lot of these people we have reached out to, a lot of their parents we have taught to start with, right? And we have even taught some of them, but they have not inculcated the knowledge. They have not they have not used that knowledge. They don't use that knowledge to inform their decisions.
Buxton is not an island. Buxton is part of a place called Guyana. So yes, you may be doing work in Buxton, but those people are part of a larger framework. You in Buxton, you can pass on some things to them. You don't have the political power. Man shall not live by bread alone.
Certainly not.
And we have to let those who hold power on our behalf, they're the ones who have to take the responsibility. Because they held power for 5 years. And they did not dedicate part of that power to black people. And I say they did things that benefited black people. But they did things that benefited black people as part of the one tide lifts all. They didn't look at what the PPP is skillfully doing. They're going to the soft underbelly of Africans, poverty. And they're saying, we are going to give you enough to get out of poverty. No, they're lying. But at least they're recognizing there's an African underbelly, soft underbelly, which our government didn't do. And so it is much more complex than people just going over and eating a bread and drinking a soup and all that kind of story. I heard a former cricketer say last night, he's a PPP candidate, he said his soup nice. This is a man that represents Guyana cricket. You would think that he would be more conscious than others. We have work to do, my brother. We have work to do on the ground, and we have work to do with our leaders, our political leaders. Welcome to Politics 101. Tonight on a Saturday night, we're talking here about local government. We're talking about the phenomenon of the PPP successfully raiding some Africans to go to the other side, turning them from Africans to Negroes, to the other side. And we are saying that they should be condemned. Yes, but the problem is much deeper than that. And we need to spend more time on developing consciousness in our community. Um, Look, the elections are going to be on Monday. I noticed the PPP after all the song and dance. They're now saying, well, look, we're not going to win Georgetown. We're not going to win Linden. We're not going to win New Amsterdam. We're going to make inroads. And we always knew that's where it was going to end up. Because you see, politics is a funny kind of animal. I am very clear in my mind that Guyanese in general, including Indian Guyanese, but more than Indian Guyanese, African Guyanese, were alienated from these elections. Our party had made the call that we were not participating. And I think we were in sync with where people heads were. But I think the obscene behavior of the PPP, the way in which the PPP has gone into our communities and shame our people, they've, in a sense, hit at the honor of the group. They're dishonoring the group. Yes, they're getting a few recruits, but the price that we are paying is that they're dishonoring the group. And when a group feels dishonored, that group fights back. And so I get the sense from listening to people that many people who were prepared to stay away from the elections as a form of protest have, in the last few weeks, changed their minds. They, if you look at the numbers in the joint forces, they said the turnout was 30% the last time. This time it's 47%. So we have already seen a sign there of increase in turnout. And my sense is that the PPP's behavior has ignited some energy in the Black community, and that the turnout is going to be higher than normal on Monday. Your take?
I certainly believe that the turnout is going to be higher than normal. But in terms of the joint services, listen, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but we have received information to say that in the joint services, big money is offered for votes. And
No,
people
no,
got
no,
to pay.
no. I hear, and we're coming to that. I'm
All
saying
right,
that
good.
even with rigging, the turnout has moved from 30 to 47. We know that there are a lot of joint services members who didn't even get to vote. So the turnout may be even larger than 47%. I'm just talking here about the PPP's action igniting a political reaction on behalf of.
Well, yes, Dr. Hines, that is one perspective. I'm giving another perspective. I'm
Yeah,
saying that
but why address that perspective first, and then we will move to the other perspective.
Dr. Hines, listen, these things are not separate and apart from each other. This is the reality. The turnout is increased.
Yes.
Right? The question is, what are the factors that might have influenced that increase in turnout? And there are several. It can't only be that the PPP's action has created this groundswell on the ground that people are saying, listen, we're going to just go and vote against them. Right? And in saying that, I want to say this. You mentioned that the PPP is now saying we're not going to win Georgetown and Linden and Bartica and so on. We're going to make inroads. I want to caution viewers and I want to caution voters, especially supporters of the APNU, to not be comforted by that statement. Because by that statement, the PPP might very well be trying to pull a trick out of the hat to get supporters of the coalition to relax and not go to the polls. Right?
You're giving the PPP too much credit there, I think. But
no.
Your point is well taken, but I'm saying let's walk the thing through step by step so that we have a clear sense of what we are saying. At the end of the day, you need an even larger turnout.
Certainly.
Right.
I've been preaching it on my program. I've been saying, listen, we know this thing is rigged. We know they're going to rig it. And so what might negate the rigging or the effect of the rigging is a larger turnout. Everybody, every nook and cranny, people from all crevices and cracks must come out and vote to keep the PPP's hands off of the NDCs. That's a fact, right? That message, along with the messaging of the opposition and so on, will very well cause people to turn out in larger numbers, right? It will very well cause people to turn out in larger numbers. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are disgusted, like you rightly said, at the behavior of the PPP. And so we expect they will go there and vote against the PPP. But we must not tell ourselves that by just having these larger numbers turn out, we are going to necessarily get over the threshold easily. Take, for example, the PPP is, while some of us want to be comfortable now, the PPP is continuing to do what they're doing. Yesterday, for example, GCOM issued a statement saying this: no telephones, no cell phones will be allowed into the polling booths. A few hours ago, we saw a notice to the opposite, saying they inadvertently included cell phones in that notice. It was intended to say no cameras, and they said no cameras and cell phones. And so they are now removing cell phones from that prohibited list. And we know what the word on the street is in terms of cell phone and voting, right? So the opinion there is that even at this the PP is working the trick.
Let's decipher that. Yeah? Remember, representation was made against cell phones and so forth. It led GCOM to cite an order consistent with the law for cameras. And they put out that order. We know there was a GCOM meeting this morning. Mr. Amsterdam, you with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
We know there was a GCOM meeting this morning. And obviously, the GCOM meeting this morning overturned the decision of earlier in the week. See, these are the things I want to get out. I want us to get out of yours about how GCOM itself is participating in the rigging. All right?
Yeah, my point exactly.
There was a meeting of the commissioners this morning. So this new directive that you're talking about obviously arose from the meeting this morning. It means that one of the 7 commissioners changed their minds. Mr. Amsterdam, you with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
All right, stay with me. I like watch me my interviewee in the eye, and I like to watch me in the eye. Leave them comments for a little while.
No, I'm not looking at comments. I'm with you, right? And that is why I said that we can't relax at this 11th hour, because the PPP is still working their trick, right? The PPP is still working their trick, and so we have to continue to encourage our viewers. We have to continue to encourage supporters of the opposition to get out there and get the vote out, because the larger the number of voters for the opposition, the better the chances of really what should I say, nullifying the impact of the rigging that is taking place at GCOM on behalf of the PPP and by PPP operatives, right? So don't let us get comfortable because the PPP is saying, listen, we're gonna win this thing. We're gonna make inroads. It's a 3-card trick. It is.
But it's also an admission that the opposition is up his game. You see, while you don't want to be overly optimistic, you can be overly pessimistic.
Very well.
All right.
It is a fact that the opposition has upped its game.
You got to own victory. Sometimes pour people on. You know, if you say we're winning, yes, some people may become complacent, but some people may be spurred to come out of the woodworks. So do not be afraid to say you're winning.
There's no doubt that we're winning. I was in the city today, for example, and I was quite elated to see the opposition had a motorcade, if I can call it that, moving around the lodge area. I don't know if this South Georgetown they call it, but there was a motorcade in moving around that area and encouraging people to get out the vote and so on. I've seen similar activities in Kwakwani and around the New Amsterdam and so on. And so yes, the opposition certainly is getting its act together. I'm seeing more of the coalition members of parliament out there doing video messages, encouraging folks to get the vote out and that is encouraging, right? That is certainly encouraging. That is a good sign, and I am positive that eventual coming together, putting every shoulder to the wheel, will result in good things to the opposition. But all I'm saying is, don't let us get lackadaisical now.
But I also want to pose the question to you, and that is, what's in this for opposition? Suppose what's in this for black people?
Good. Listen, like you said earlier, this local government election is perhaps one of the most important. A lot is at stake in this local government elections. Let me point out. Let me start in Linden, for example. Just outside of Linden, the PPP is constructing a town they call Silica City. Right? In that same area, we have the Linden-Lethem Road. And the Linden-Lethem Road is critical for trade between Ghana and Brazil. And we know that the projection was, since the APNU was in office, that, listen, things are going to grow, things are going to be concretized with the Brazil government and Ghanaian government in terms of making that Linden-Lethem Road perhaps a container route and so on and so forth. And a lot of commerce, therefore, is going to develop in that area. If you were to allow the PPP to take control of the Linden municipality, in short, they are the ones who are going to be controlling the resources in that locality. And normally, as expected, they are going to give it out to their friends and cronies. Linden is also developing nicely as a tourist attraction. And likewise, you allow the PPP to get their hands on Linden, those sites and everything that will give you the opportunity for involvement in the economic life of Linden is going to be controlled by the PPP and farmed out to their friends and cronies. Come to Georgetown, you'll find a similar situation. Because right now, for all the years, the PPP has been trying to get their hands in Georgetown. If you look at the business structures, if I can call it that, around Georgetown, they're predominantly owned by supporters of the PPP, right? The PPP has consistently refused, for example, to allow the city council to do re-evaluation of property values so that they can increase rates and taxes, so that they can get adequate income to better service the city. We know of the lottery project that the PPP coveted when it was proposed by Hamilton Green, and all of those things. The aim again of the PPP is to take control of Georgetown. And
Mr. Amsterdam,
yes,
I hear you. At the end of the day, when the PNC wins these municipalities, nothing is going to change because the central government still has control over the purse. My question to you, hold on. My question to you, and I hope you are not falling in the trap, is what's in this for black people. But I want to give you some time to reflect on that question. Hold on, we take a little break.
Go ahead.
People, fantastic number 22. Westwood Rollins, on the look for that. Brooklyn. Get 'em.
remember self, you can see black man cry. Look, blood still running from black people's eye. But I remember when a song rise, African rise. And I beg black man, please open your eyes. While I was singing and busting me liver shrink, black man asking me where Atlantic lay. Then they put their 14 finger on the shelf. So today, black man, you must weigh yourself. But when I sing, they never listen to Coco say. Black man mentality, gun spectrum and PSA. The lyrics I sing, they wouldn't listen to me. Black man telling black man, oh black man, come out to party. I remember when I sing sham, we don't want it. They said black brother said, Coco, you sing shit. So today, step through my call while you strike your heart. Black man, all you look for that. I wonder why black man always want that kickstart. Black man, all you look for that. A man on a charge for interfering. Black man always still go and vote for him. Black man, how I thought you could control this. You thought I might have to work in this man's office. Then imagine the sex silver-headed best. Quail fingers under your daughter's dress. Me and saying that Patrick should have win, sir. But even Jim Baker would have been better. All them women who went begging the other day about this Mr. Way, all you have to say. Cause the name this thing all the silent and talking peace. So the office girls must be at the mercy of this peace. He was charged, so whether it is false or true, I'm concerned because I have a daughter too. I'm talking from my heart and telling you. Black man, all you look for that. Why do you always want that extra? Black man, all you look for that. Tobago, I was really annoyed with you. But I realized all of that gets too. All you could not believe them two with a COVID pandemic and give away Tobago best holiday. All them two could sit down on the wrong table and then look for the best for their own people. But all you cannot quarrel, all you cannot fret. That is where you ask for, that is where you get. We love Shadow Nelson and Calypso Rose. We won't go we honestly recognize those. Quite of a great footballer with Aston Villa. We always show love and respect to that fella. But all you smile when Robbie married to Pande. I hope all you understand what Samara say. If he does marry a black man, he chop shit. Tobago, all you look for that. Mighty Mashka, the son and Sunny Man Star. Tobago, all you look for that. Remember slavery on the plantation? Master used to use a black man to be black man. So when I get 17, I got a pain. I say, oh, all black man to be black man again. Black man give black man soup, but black man won't have. Black man intelligent to pressure his own black man. He give them soup, they treat them like I'm a gas. So now black man takes smoke carrying in ya. I remember this not the half of the African. The two seats rest your hand, the ball in your hand. I spoke to Leroy Clark and Capra Cameron. And up to now I can't understand what's going on. You went and was sighted up in Africa. But do you black brother, you prove a traitor. If I prove a return and the shooting Ata, all you look for that. And if your daughter should cross the PM path, Ata, all you look for that. I honestly
The bad boy of Trinidad Calypso, the mighty Crow Crow. We need some Calypsonians like that in Guyana. Black man, are you look for that? Just what them black man doing now in Guyana, doing Trinidad and the Calypsonian, tell you why they ask black man always want a kickstart. Why we always want a kickstart? Why we have to wait until we backs against the wall and then we hustling? We need some the fact that we're not producing Calypsonian that managed like that says a lot about the nature of our society and politics. Which Calypsonian would come out and sing like crow, like that? Black man, all you look for that. Look, this election is not about saving anything. Let me disagree with my brother. The central government still control the purse. Our holding on to NDCs and so on is symbolic. It's symbolic. But it's a symbol that we have to hold on to. Let's don't fool our people that our tongues are now going to get more money and all that nonsense. In fact, the PPP, let me finish. In fact, the PPP is going to pressure those tongues more when the coalition or the APNU wins. When I ask what is in this for black people, I'm saying black people go out on Monday and vote against the PPP. You're bailing out the PNC. That's what this election is about. If the PPP were to get their hands on those municipalities, the PNC is dead in the boots. What this election is largely about on Monday is bailing the PNC out. And black people are going to bail them out. I'm confident of that. What black people will get in return? I'm asking what the PNC will give black people in return. We telling you all go and vote against the PPP. For me, David Hines, tell the PNC you want your pound of flesh. Because you're giving them a ton of your flesh. Tell them you want your pound of flesh, which they have not been giving you all. So I'm telling you all to go and give you all vote for nothing on Monday. Give you all vote for something. Let me hear what my young comrades got to say.
I certainly agree with you that the supporters of the PNC must demand their pound of flesh. In other words, I've been saying to them, go out there and vote for the PNC, vote for the APNU. You ain't gonna watch a child drown because you've been cautioning them and they do their own thing. But at the end of the day, you have to hold them accountable. Hold their feet to the fire so that they deliver to you. What is at stake? Like you rightly said, we're bailing out the PNC. The PNC is representative of black people for the greater part in this country. And so you're bailing out an institution that is supposed to be defending black people. Also, what is at stake for black people is their right to partake in the commercial life of these communities and these neighborhoods and these municipalities. Because the fact is, yes, once the PPP doesn't get their hands on the municipalities, they're going to squeeze them in terms of resources. They're not going to increase the resources that they're giving to them. Let us not fool ourselves to that. But those black people who now have businesses in those municipalities will be able to maintain their presence there. But the minute you give the PPP carte blanche over these municipalities and over the NDCs, basically what you're signing up for is a one-party state. And what you will have happening, especially in the towns and in the city, the PPP and their operatives are going to force black people out of the commercial life of those areas. And so that too is at stake for black people.
We must not always put our people in a lose-lose situation. Often, as happened now, when the party back is against the wall, our people have to go and bail them out, and often they get nothing. I hear all them things that you all telling me about taxes and all those things. And those things may have been true, but I'm talking here about power. and using that power to help your people. And I think that has to be the focus here. I think the voters have to say to the PNC, we coming to your rescue one more time. But this time, we are making some demands of you. That nonsense that you're all not going on the road and pressuring this government to stop battering us has to go. We must lay demands. When this local government election is over, it must not be business as usual with the PPP. Those are demands we have to tell our voters. Don't just tell them, go and vote PNC. Put a price on your vote. Let the PNC realize they have to get off their backsides and confront this government. That is the point I'm making here. And to me, that's a larger point than all them tax things that you're all talking about. It is about saying to the PNC, we are bailing you out, but after June 12th, it's not business as usual. Talk to me, Kidaki, answer that.
After June 12th can be business as usual. Because immediately after June 12th, the PNC has to get its act together because they are soon to be faced with the national elections. And if we are saying that these local government elections are critical, I think the national elections are much, much, much more important because it deals with who controls the national treasury. And so, yes, it can be business as usual. And voters, like you rightly say, like I've been saying, must hold the PNC accountable, must make demands from the PNC, must insist that the PNC give them better representation that it has been giving them for the last three years plus or whatever the timeline. And so, yes, the leaders of the PNC, the parliamentarians of the PNC, the soon-to-be elected councillors of the PNC must be prepared to give that representation to Black people. Like I said, in one of my programs during the week, Black people must understand that the councillors are the political leadership of the NDCs and town councils and city councils and so on. Let the administrative officers in terms of the overseers and town clerk, etc., do their administrative job. But the political leaders must be prepared to take political actions to satisfy the need for services and so on for the people in these areas. And so if it means that you have to go and stand in front of the ministry and protest, you have to do that. And voters can't accept anymore and ought not to accept anymore this thing of not wanting to go on the streets.
We want leadership. I'm not telling people whether they must go and pick it or they must go on this and go on that. What we want is militant leadership. You have a runaway government that has tamed the opposition. And we had this situation the other day when our party stepped out and pushed our neck out. We had opposition leaders climbing over one another for condemning him. And if we didn't holler on them and call them slave catchers, more of them would have come out. And we said that nonsense must stop. We want militant leadership from the PNC. And if the PNC can give militant leadership, and we want to stop our people from going over to the PPP, leaders and organizations like ours have to step forward and speak boldly. We can't be speaking the same stupid language as the PNC. This here is a pragmatic vote that we are doing on Monday. It's a pragmatic vote. It is a vote to save the party and to save the morale of Black people. It's not about all them taxes and all those things. It's that for me. And so therefore, put a price on your vote. Put a price on your vote. Go vote, but put a price on it. Yes, I listen to you, Kiraki Amsterdam.
Well, again,
Also,
the
you agree
position.
with me. Say you agree with me, though, man. But
Yeah,
again,
the position is the same. Go vote and put a price on it. Go vote and put a price on it. Turn
reiterate
out
it.
your numbers, but demand that you get the kind of representation that you just
Our
need.
political party
Right.
said it's not participating.
I
And
see.
here we are, rallying people to go to vote in an election that we are not participating in. That's a heavy contribution we are making there. Some people will
Certainly.
call us hypocrites. And we must not sit here and make it look as though there's some technical political reason that you should go out and vote. You're going out and vote to save the race, to save the party from embarrassment. And so therefore, your price must be high. And you must indicate it's the last time you're doing this nonsense. Talk to me.
Well, again, I agree. Princess Marcus is saying that we should go into the elections, and quite frankly, I'm of the firm belief that, listen, if the PNC doesn't step up after these local government elections, then WPA has a responsibility to do all that it can humanly
I am
possibly
prepared
do.
to take that responsibility.
Right.
I don't project myself too much out as leader, but I'm tired of the PNC, and I love them. A lot of them are my friends, but they've been useless these last 3 years. Useless. And they put us in a position where we have no panicking that the little that we have, the PPP is about to take away. And they have made that possible by sitting on their backsides and saying that they can't do this and they can't do that. And I want you all to tell them that David Hines said so tonight. Because in many regards, I've been accused of defending and protecting them for 3 years. But that's over now. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. It's tough love time. You all go out and bail them out because you are giving yourself a chance. Giving yourself a chance. As Croco asked, why the hell black leaders always want a kickstart? It's time that we black people get tough with our leaders. Could I answer that?
Well, again, I agree. We have to get tough with our leaders. And I'm happy tonight that you have basically taken the responsibility. You said you will take that responsibility to, in my mind, quote unquote, fill that gap should the PNC doesn't step up to the plate, right? Because as it is right now, it is recognized that it is the WPA that is in the boys in the street would say carrying the swing, and the WPA has at this 11th hour come out to rally voters and say, go support the PNC, go support the APNU, because it is about the dignity of the race, it is about protection for the race, it is about representation for the race. And while we are out here rallying, a lot of people may not know that even some people would say behind the scenes, a lot more work is being done by us to support the efforts of the APNU to get the vote out so that we can ensure that the PPP doesn't get its hands on these constituencies. And so after these elections, I've been saying it, the PNC must either step up or WPA must take charge.
We have to recognize we live in a society in which you have two large ethnic groups that are competing with one another. We are competing. We are competitors. We measure our condition against the condition of the other side. And you have to recognize that, first of all, you have to defend what territory you have. You first must defend what territory you have. And the PNC has been found wanting. Could not defend its own people, its own members. Could not defend it.
Couldn't defend its own office and let them.
And that is such a big shame. It is that party that gets all the resources. It is that party that gets all the press coverage. That party that has the resources. And people give you resources to defend them. And we are wondering why people, most of them opportunistically, are saying, you all can't defend we, so we looking after we self. A lot of it is opportunism. I know that. A lot of it is opportunism. But it's a reality. We are giving them the excuse to be opportunistic. We are giving them the excuse to be opportunistic by not defending our territory. And the PNC need to hang its head in shame at what they've allowed to take place in this country. They've allowed the PPP to break the unwritten rules of engagement in this country. There's certain things they're understanding is that the PPP don't go into black communities and do certain things. It's an unwritten rule. And that the PPP don't go into Indian areas and do certain things. Unwritten rule. The PPP has defended their territory, not one crossover from the PPP to the PNC. So it means the PPP has defended its territory and it has gone in and raided the PNC territory. And it's an eternal shame. And the PNC need to hang its head in shame. I don't care how much division they get in the party. That's their business. When it comes to the business of your supporters of black people, you all need to get up and get. And black people need to say, we're going to bail you all out. We're going to bail you all out. We're going to save you all from embarrassment. But you have to put a price on it. You have to put a price on it. I'm tired of listening to PNC people giving all kind of stupid speeches. Jack Dio this and Jack Dio that, and Indian people suffering too. That's all. That's all you all telling black people. That's all you all telling what Jack Dio do. We know that. We know what Jack Dio doing. We know Indian people are suffering. What the hell are you doing to defend us? To defend us. Welcome to tonight's special, and I hope the PNC listening to me. I've been accused of being soft on the PNC because my general rule of thumb is that when you are in a battle, you don't fight among yourself. And I still maintain that. But I thought tonight, as I lend my voice in this home stretch, to say to African Guyanese, go out and vote down the PPP, which translates into giving you vote for the PNC. And note I'm not saying APNU because that's dead. APNU is dead. It's the PNC. And I'm lending my voice to say, you all go out and vote in large numbers. But put a price on it. And the alternative to the PNC doesn't have to be the PPP. It doesn't have to be the PPP. Because there are those of us who are in the valley, have been in the valley, fighting and fighting and fighting. And you all treat us sometimes as nobody, that we're just good to fight. But we're not good to lead. Black people, you all got changed. Why the hell black man always want us to kickstart? Kroko said, black man said, black leader give them soup. Now they get smoke and everything in their ass. You're all too young to understand the significance of smoke and race. Some of you are too young to understand it. Where are the Calypsonians? Where are the Calypsonians? We have DJ Magnum tonight at Linden. And we can break down the dance hall. Where are the conscious artists on this bandwagon to save the race? We got plenty work to do in the black community. We do plenty work. Kiraki, any thoughts, boy?
Well, my only thought is we need to get the vote out. We have to get the vote out. My advice is people get up early, go vote, and spend your time in the rest of the day getting others to go out and vote. There are a lot of criticisms against leadership and the weakness of the PNC and so on, but I will maintain that this is not the time to necessarily.
No, this is the time. Kiraki, this is the time. This must go hand in hand. Get up early and go out and vote. But when you're going out there, stare the PPP, the PNC in the eye and say this vote is a protest vote, not only against the PPP, it's a protest against you all. Now is the time to sound the bell. I disagree with you with that.
Very well, we all are on the same team, and so
go
you have
out
a right
and
to
vote and watch the PPP with blood in your eyes. Watch the PNC with anger on your face, but cast your vote for them. You mustn't tell our people take the soft way out, and then tomorrow we say the PNC too soft. Well, the PNC is soft because we're telling people to be soft. Make a political statement on Monday. A political statement against the PPP and a political statement in the asses of the PNC. Closing thoughts, Kidaki Amsterdam. Sorry, doing the thing.
My closing thoughts are exactly what I've been saying throughout the program. We need to support the PNC at the polls. We need to go there early. We need to cast our votes. We need to encourage others to go out and cast their votes. Remember that, many hands make the dream. Teamwork makes the dream work. Many hands make light work. There are people who are going to be shut in. There are people who are going to need assistance to get to the polls. Whatever assistance you can provide, please provide it so that everybody gets to go to the polls and cast their vote against the PPP. Right? That vote against the PPP is in support of the PNC, but most importantly, in my mind, is in defense of the rights of African Guyanese to partake in the management of their communities through local government, the management of the municipalities and towns, and the right to partake in commercial enterprises in the towns and cities and everything. So go there and stand up for your right. At the same time, like Dr. Hines have been saying, like I've been saying, let the leaders of the PNC know that it's not a free vote you're giving them. You expect them to step up to the plate and provide a better quality of service through representation to you. Those are my closing thoughts.
And my closing thought is representation is limited in a winner-take-all system. And the best representation the PNC can give to the people is to fight for a clean voters list, to fight for biometrics, to fight to take away the rigging machinery, to fight to democratize GCOM so that you can put your hand again on power. Again tonight, my little brother being very conservative tonight, but sometimes we have to walk on both legs. I'm being tough like an eagle tonight.
Thank you, viewers, for inviting and accepting me into your spaces. Do have a great weekend. Let's continue the fight.
See you all tomorrow night.